So we're able to fetch all the products. Let's now implement the code to fetch a single product. And for that, I'm back in the shop.js controller file. And here it's the getProduct function I want to work on. Here we get the product ID as part of the URL. And then we want to use our product model to somehow find the fitting product. And therefore, we of course need to work on the model again. And feel free to implement this on your own if you got some MongoDB knowledge. It's a great challenge then. Otherwise, of course, we'll just do this together. So, how would I fetch a single product? Well, besides having my static fetchAll method, I'll add another static method, findById. And you can name this however you want, of course. Here I expect to get a product ID as an argument, and then, just as before, I'll call getDB to get access to that database connection we have. And I then want to return the result of an operation where I use my collection, and there I will now pass products again because it's still the same collection I want to interact with. And I will find a product here, but I'll find only one product. And to do that, I'll narrow down the result set with find, and then I'll pass a JavaScript object to it, which allows me to configure a filter. And here, I want to look for a product where _ID is equal to prod ID, because that's the ID of the product I'm looking for. So with this, I'm returning theoretically all products which have this ID, but I know it'll only be one, so I can use find like this, and I'll only get back one product. Or do I? Well, actually, find will still give me a cursor, because MongoDB doesn't know that I will only get one. And here, we can use next, the next function, to get the next, and in this case here also the last, document that was returned by find here. So here I can then add then and catch, and as always, log any error I might have, and then in then, where I will have my one product, there I will log it to the console for one, and then I will return my product. So now this should hopefully yield my product here. Now with that, if we go back to the shop controller with findById, I either have an error or I get my product and I try to render the product detail page. Now let's go to the routes and there to the shop.js file, and we need to comment in that route here for getting the product details. If we now save everything, let's click on details here. And one thing you can see is that this doesn't seem to work, right? We always get redirected to the /products page. So if I go back to the starting page, and we can tell the difference by the distance between the $sign and the character, I'm on the starting page. If I click details, I just get forwarded to products. Now, why is that? Now, this actually happens because no product ID is passed when I click details. And therefore, we end up in this route. Now, why is no product ID passed? If we have a look at our view, and there at our index.js file in the shop folder, in there, we got our details button, and I do actually add the product ID here, but what is the error here? Well, I access product.id here, but with MongoDB, it's _ID. So I should use product_ID. And the same, of course, on the product list page. There, I should also use product_ID. So in all the places of the app where we use product.id, we should now use product_ID. With that, if we reload that page here, the starting page or the products page, doesn't matter. If I now click details, now something else happens. Now we get stuck here because we have an error. But that is better than before, because now at least we do have an ID which we try to find. So what's the issue here now? Why do I get cannot read property title of null? Well, for one, it's worth noting that null is printed here as well. And that null should be stemming from my product model from find by ID when I console log the product. So it looks like we didn't find any product for that ID. And what could be the reason for that now? The reason for that is that the ID in MongoDB is actually stored a bit differently. And we can see this in Compass. The ID is actually such an object ID thing. Now, I did mention that MongoDB stores data in BSON format. And this binary format of JSON is not just used because it's a bit faster to work with, it is, but also because MongoDB can store some special types of data in there. An object ID is such a type. It's a type added by MongoDB. It's not a default JavaScript type. Actually, it doesn't exist in JavaScript at all. And it's simply an ID object which MongoDB uses because this generates and manages IDs which look random but actually aren't. So IDs, for example, are created in a way that if you create an ID now and an ID 1 second later, the ID 1 second later will alphabetically be a higher value than the previous one. But that's just one thing. So object ID is an object provided by MongoDB. And if we look for equality, we can't compare _ID, which in a database will only hold object ID values, with a string, because a string is not equal to the object ID. And the string in here does not count. MongoDB will not compare this. It compares the entire object ID. So to fix this, we simply go into our product model, and in there, I'll import MongoDB by requiring MongoDB from the package. And now I can use MongoDB to get access to that object ID type. So here, when I compare, I can use MongoDB.objectID. And I can create a new, this is a constructor, a new object ID to which I pass a string which will be wrapped by that. So now if I save that and I try reloading that page for that ID, now you see this works, because now I create such an object ID object, and therefore here, when I'm telling MongoDB, find me all documents where the ID stored in the database is equal to that, MongoDB will now succeed because we now pass an object ID object to the comparison instead of just a string. And now this works too. It's very important that you keep in mind that MongoDB stores IDs in _ID and that it uses this special object ID type for that.